Chapter 4. That night, Minley could not sleep. Ma's words echoed in her ears, and when she closed her eyes, she saw Ba's hand shaking from hard work, feeding the goldfish. Ma's right, Minley thought to herself. The goldfish is just another mouth to feed. I can't let Ba feed the goldfish. Ma and Ba work so hard for every grain of rice. Ba shouldn't have to feed the goldfish too. Minley slipped quietly out of her bed and crept to the table where the goldfish was. They stared at each other, and Minley knew what she had to do. Quickly slipping on her shoes and jacket, she took the goldfish and left the house. It was late. The village was quietly asleep, and the stars above filled the sky like spilled salt on dried seaweed. Minley's footsteps seemed to hush the night as she made her way toward the Jade River. At the edge of the river, Minley looked at her goldfish one last time. The moon shone above, so even in the darkness of the night, the fish seemed to burn a bright orange. Its black eyes sparkled at her. "I'm sorry I can't keep you," Minley whispered. "I hope you'll be all right in the river." And with those words, she emptied the bowl into the water. For a moment, the fish seemed shocked and was still, like a flickering flame on a match. Then it wiggled in the water and swam in circles, a joyful fire twirling in the water. Minley watched it and sighed. As the sound faded into the night, Minley realized it was an echo of her mother's impatient, frustrated noise. Ma will never stop sighing unless our fortune changes. But how will it ever change? Minley asked ruefully. I guess that is just another question for the old man of the moon. Too bad no one knows how to get to Never-Ending Mountain to ask him anything. The fish stopped swimming and looked up at Minley. I know where it is, it said. The female voice was high and soft, like the wind whistling through the reeds of the water. Minley stared. Did you say something? She asked. Yes, the fish said. I know how you can get to Never-Ending Mountain, and asked the old man of the moon a question. Are you a talking fish? Minley asked, her words tumbling into each other with excitement. How can you talk? Most fish talk, the fish said, if you are willing to listen. One, of course, must want to hear. I do, Minley said, enthralled and eager. This was just like one of Ba's stories. She bubbled with excitement. How do you know the way to Never-Ending Mountain? I swam all the oceans and rivers except one, the fish said, and on my way to the last, the goldfish man caught me. I despaired in his cart, for I have seen and learned much of the world, including the way to Never-Ending Mountain. Since you have set me free, I will tell you. You swum all the oceans and rivers? Minley asked. The question spilled like overflowing water. Which river haven't you seen? Why have you traveled so much? Where is Never-Ending Mountain? And when did? This river is the one river I have not swum, the fish interrupted. I have waited a long time to see it, so I would like to start as soon as possible. You can ask the old man of the sea all your other questions. Let me tell you the way to him so I can be off. Minley nodded and asked no more. She realized she was having a conversation with a goldfish, which was very unusual, so she decided to listen. Chapter 5. The next morning, Minley felt as if her head was spinning with thoughts and plans. She was so busy thinking and plotting that she barely noticed her parents nodding sadly at each other when they saw the empty fish bowl. And in the fields, when Minley worked as if in a daze, her parents said nothing about her slow and messy planting. When the sun began to set and Minley went home to make dinner, she quickly washed and made the rice. Then she set the table for 2 people and sat down and wrote this note. Dear Ma and Ba, I am going to Never-Ending Mountain to ask the old man of the moon how I can change our fortune. I might be away for many days, but don't worry, I will be fine. When I come back, we will be able to fill our house with gold and jade. Love, your obedient daughter, Minley. The obedient part isn't completely true, Minley thought to herself, as she knew her parents would not be happy to find her gone. But it's not false either. They didn't say I couldn't go, so I'm not being disobedient. Still, Minley knew that wasn't entirely right either, but she shook away her uneasy feelings and prepared for her journey. On a blanket she put a needle, a pair of chopsticks, and her white rabbit rice bowl, a small piece of dried bamboo, a hollow gourd full of water, a small knife, a fish net, some uncooked rice, a large pot, and the one remaining copper coin. Then she wrapped her blanket into a bag and tied it on her back and took one last look at the shabby house. Through the window, Fruitless Mountain stood like a shadow, but Minley closed her eyes and imagined the house shimmering with gold and the mountain jade green with trees, and smiled. Then she opened the door and left. As Minley left her house, she was afraid some of her neighbors would stop her and ask her where she was going. She felt she must look mysterious with a large bag on her back and full of excitement, but no one noticed her. The neighbors kept sweeping their doorways, hanging their laundry, and preparing dinner. A boy and a girl continued their fight over a pretend feast of mud. When the mother called them for dinner, both refused to move, each clinging to their dishes of wet dirt. Minley had to smile at their foolishness. So Minley walked right out of the village without causing a second glance. At the edge of the village, she turned toward Fruitless Mountain. At the bottom of the mountain, she unwrapped her blanket and took out her knife, needle, rice bowl, bamboo piece, and a jug of water. Then, trying to remember all the goldfish instructions, she cracked off a small bit of stone and rubbed it up and down the needle 99 times before tossing it back to the ground. Then she filled her rice bowl halfway with water and let the bamboo float in it. After that, she picked up the needle and looked at the white rabbit on her bowl. "Okay," she said to the jumping rabbit, "lead the way." And she placed the needle onto the bamboo. Like magic, the needle spun around. Minley smiled. "Thank you," Minley said again to the painted rabbit. "Now, I'll follow where you want me to go." Minley picked up her things and, carefully holding the bowl in her hand, walked in the direction of the needle, past Fruitless Mountain. "Goodbye, Jade Dragon," Minley said as she left. "When I come back, I know how to make you happy again." Minley walked and walked, and the stony land slowly turned into forest. Even when the moon was high in the sky, she continued. "I want to make sure I walk far enough that if Ma and Ba begin to look for me, they can't find me," Minley said to herself. The fallen leaves made a soft carpet for her feet. The night birds flew into the sky as she passed. Only when the sky lightened to gray and the sun began to peek over the horizon did Minley sit down and rest against a tall tree. She had traveled deep into the forest, far from her village and from her home. She was so tired that she quickly fell asleep. Chapter 7. The sun had set and the moon was just beginning to rise in the sky when Ma and Ba returned home from the fields. Even though they could smell the steam from the rice cooking, they noticed the house was strangely dark and quiet. "Why is Minley sitting in the darkness?" Ma wondered as they approached the house. "Perhaps she is sad about giving up her goldfish," Ba said as he shook his head. "Can our fortune be any poorer?" Ma sighed. "We cannot even feed a goldfish for our daughter." But as Minley's parents entered the house and read her note, Ma made a noise like a shrieking cat. "I spoke too soon," Ma cried. "Our fortune is now the worse, for our only daughter is gone." "Quiet, quiet, wife," Ba hushed her. "If we move quickly, we can find her and bring her back home." Ba quickly took out his cloth sack and gathered blankets and filled an empty bottle with water. "She has had almost half a day to travel ahead," he said. "It might take us some time to find her." Ma watched him and then began to pack the cooked rice into a traveling box. But she continued to weep. "It is all the stories you told her," Ma sobbed. "She believed him and now is looking for fairy tales." Her words cut into Ba like slices from a knife, but even though his face was pained, he said nothing and continued to pack. His hands trembled as he tied the bag closed, but they were gentle when he put them on Ma's shoulders. "Let us go," he said. As they left the house, many of their neighbors poked their heads out of their doors. They heard Ma scream through the thin walls of their closely spaced houses and wanted to know what had happened. When Ma and Ba told them, it seemed as if the whole village poured out from their homes. "Never-ending mountain, the old man of the moon, changing your fortune," the neighbors said. "You better go find her or else she will never return. Foolish Minley, she's trying to do the impossible." Each villager pointed and nodded toward the direction they had seen Minley last. Some had seen her heading home, others toward the rice fields. But finally a small boy was heard. "Minley left toward Fruitless Mountain," he said. "I saw her with her pack. She went that way." So with the villagers waving them goodbye, Ma and Ba walked toward Fruitless Mountain, their dark shadows trailing behind them in the moonlight. But when they reached the mountain, they looked at each other uncertainly. Where did she go from here? Bob wondered, and he lit the lantern in his hand. The soft light seemed to warm the air and soften the glowing darkness. Here, Ma cried out, pointing to the ground. There are footprints going toward the woods. Maybe they are Minley's. Bob looked at the footprints. There was another mark accompanying them, a long pulling line. Bob pointed at them. But what is that? He wondered. Maybe Minley was dragging a walking stick, Ma said. The footprints could be hers. Bob looked again at the footprints. They seemed small and nimble. Perhaps they are, Bob said. Let's follow them. And so they did.